Hey, today's Daily Ticker brought to you by Pelican Brewing Company. We're making a list. We're checking it twice. Yeah. Got to find out if you're naughty or nice. I do have to say, I think our guest might be on the naughty list today.
Really?
I think he might be on the naughty list today. Joining us
SEC
now.
honk? What's going on there?
Joining us now is the commissioner of college football, Josh Pate. Josh Pate's College Football Show every Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, 5 o'clock, live on YouTube. Catch the podcast wherever you find the podcast. Give him a follow on Twitter at Josh Pate. CFB. I did get the wife to subscribe, by the way, so Pate State material over here.
Picked up another one.
Look, I'm watching the show Sunday, Josh, and I see Oregon's losing to Ohio State, and I'm like, damn, he hates my team, because this is the way it works. Either a right or you hate my team and my lineage and my family and everything that comes with me. And then on the last night's show, I'm like, all right, he's making some changes to his predictions. I'm excited to see how far he has my Ducks going. And now he's got just one more game, and then they're losing to Texas. Not even getting to a championship. Why do you hate my team, Josh Pate?
Well, it's a long story. Dan and I have never gotten along, and I've always hated my trips up there. It's a really dead stadium, notoriously unloud. The colors suck. Yeah. They're really, really boring with their uniforms. Just for these reasons, among many others, I've always hated Oregon, and I can't express in strong enough terms how much it's reflected in my new bracket. How are you guys doing?
We're doing fantastic, Josh. We had the bracket reveal. That was kind of fun and controversial to some. What did you think of Oregon's draw, though? Tennessee, Ohio State winner, and then potentially either a Kenny Dillingham, maybe a Dabo, the outside looking in, or Texas. What did you think of Oregon's draw?
Let's just be real. Okay, let's just put all our cards on the table. This is ridiculous. First off, that's what I think about the draw. Secondly, you're not seeing Dabo Swinney. The last time you see Dabo Swinney will be 4 o'clock Eastern time on that second day of the playoffs, and then they will be disposed of.
Yeah.
And look, God bless Arizona State. I've loved that story, but they're going to get disposed of too. So you will be dealing with Texas if you get there. And at that point, we'll just knife fight on the air about who's going to win that game. I thought the draw was terrible. Dan Lanning and his team have said all the right things. They can't say anything other than that. They're competitors. It's almost like none of their business. This conversation's none of their business. It's the business of people who aren't actually coaching or playing, who just observe. Allegedly, the sport is made for us, the fans. So I looked at it a year ago, and I said, this format's BS. And I kept singing that chorus, and everyone kept saying, shut up, stop talking about it, stop complaining. So I said, okay, I'll be quiet. And then the closer we got to Selection Sunday, everyone sort of dusted off the hymnal and started singing the song that I was singing a year ago, saying, wait a second. This format, ladies and gentlemen, we may have a problem. And I'm like Tom Hanks up on Apollo 13 and said, you think we got a problem, huh? Now you think we've got a problem. Of course we had a problem. Well, now it's old hat, and everyone's pointed out what the problems are. But it's too late because the thing's already been seeded and it's already been set. So Oregon, for all I know, could go on and win the whole thing, and people will think it's a moot point. It's not a moot point. Just like it's not a moot point that Boise shouldn't have a first-round bye if they go and win their first game or if they lose by 30. Like, the format is either sound or it's not sound. The results within the tournament are irrelevant, because you have to seed the thing not based on seeing the future. You have to seed it based on the body of work. And so I hate a lot of it, but you guys know I've had a long-standing gripe with expanding the thing to begin with. But even if we were going to expand it, the format's terrible. Now, I told you on the show last night that you were pointing out they had to agree to this format. I'm not stupid. I know why they had to agree to this format. So then the next order of business is how long will this agreed-upon format be in place? And I think the sands of time are rapidly fading on this format, even though we haven't played one version of the format yet.
Oh, it's beautiful, isn't it? And that's the great thing about college football. We're always going to have an evolving postseason format. Now, you got into it a little bit last night. I thought it was fascinating and actually kind of interesting, and it's going to connect to a question I want to ask you in a moment. But for our listeners, by the way, Beaverton, Oregon got a shout-out on the show last night. Love to hear that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
the format that you're hearing and just kind of where you think this is going and how conference championship weekend will look in the years to come.
Yeah, so what the SEC and the Big Ten really wanted to get to is this format where their conference tournament, if you want to call it that, the process of deciding their conference champion is baked into the playoff itself. Forever, we have looked at the postseason as, all right, you go through the regular season, and then you crown your conference champion, and then you go on to the playoff. Well, the way they're looking at it is we cannot allow these conference championship games to lose their value. We cannot allow that weekend to lose its value. We're getting way too much money from these networks for that. And so they've looked at that. And then they've also, especially in the SEC, they've looked at the concept that they think they got screwed out of spots because they play tougher schedules than everyone else. Now, I know which city I am speaking in right now. You don't have to agree with that. I am telling you merely what they think down there, and they happen to have the biggest microphone, so you will hear it whether you like it or not. So they're looking at all that, and they're saying, how do we rectify this moving forward? And the thing that I think they're going to move towards rapidly is they will look and they'll say, we've got to get an amount of guaranteed seats at the table. So they'll probably expand the playoff again, let's say to 14 or 16 or whatever. Well, whatever it is, what's going to happen is the Big Ten and the SEC are going to look to have a certain allocation of seats at the table. So they're going to kind of reverse engineer the playoff. So if we arrive at a format where the SEC and the Big Ten are guaranteed 4 playoff seats, guaranteed, then what they do is they work backwards from that. And they say, okay, now that we've got our guaranteed seats, we got to figure out which teams are going to be in it. Well, the way you do that is you use your conference standings. So your entire league schedule is basically an apparatus attached to the playoff at that point. And what you would do with that is you don't just get to the end of the road and put your 4 top teams in there. What you would do to reward your top 2 teams in your conference is you get to the end of the regular season, and let's say Texas and Georgia were the number 1 and number 2 teams in the SEC. Instead of taking them and putting them in the SEC championship game, you just tell whoever's number 1, all right, you won the SEC regular season tournament, you're the champion, whatever. But you take Georgia and Texas and you put them in 2 of your guaranteed 4 seats. So they're in the playoff. The way you would determine 3 and 4 is the big key here. Because what I think they will do is they'll take that conference championship weekend, and instead of having a conference title game, I think they'll have 1 or, in this case, 2 play-in games where 3 would play 6. So like Bama would play Tennessee. Ole Miss would play South Carolina in a 4-5 game. And the winners of those games would take seats 3 and 4 in the playoffs. That's how I think it'll happen in the Big Ten. That's how I think it'll happen in the SEC or something along those lines. Now, there are great follow-up questions that I know the professionals in that studio are going to ask, so I'll ask them for you. Well, what about the ACC? I think they'd have the same thing. I just think they'd have less guaranteed seats. Ditto for the Big 12. I think there will be guaranteed seats. I just think there will be less of them because there's going to be an acknowledgement that has to happen that they are lesser than conferences. Again, I reiterate, you don't have to like that. I'm merely telling you where I think it's going. I think there would probably be some at-large spots left there. I think there would be a G5 spot or whatever. But I think that's where we're headed. Now, do I like it? Of course I don't. I don't like any of this. I am like Mr. Potter in It's a Wonderful Life. I hate all of it. Yeah. But I think that is probably where we're going.
I don't want to pivot because that's such an interesting idea, and you tend to know these things because you're pretty well-sourced. But I am curious to get your thoughts. Bill Belichick in college football would be what?
An experiment. It would certainly be that. I think it would be temporary. I'm not intrigued with it. I'm not enamored by it at all. I think that when you looked at that headline yesterday and you saw Belichick has delivered like a 400-plus page Bible to North Carolina powers that be, and it lays out everything from strategy to staffing to organizational structure to salary structure. That all sounds good, and it sounds revolutionary to maybe the common fan who I'm not speaking pejoratively of the common fan, but the common fan does not see behind the scenes in these programs. So that kind of headline sounds revolutionary. It's not any more revolutionary than the fact that the sun came up this morning at this point in college football. Everybody who's anybody is already doing that stuff. Like years and years ago at this point, your Texases and Michigans and Georgias and Oregons and whatnot, they realized the way the sport was going. They aren't stupid. They realized this is going to reflect a lot of what they do on Sunday. So we need a general manager. We need a cap specialist. We need to understand how to fundraise. We need to understand how to properly construct roster. We need to understand how to evaluate not just high school kids, but college kids. So we understand free agency principles. All that stuff's already in practice. Bill Belichick's not bringing a single revolutionary concept to North Carolina if he does come to Carolina. The key for him to win there would be the same key for anyone else to win anywhere. It's, do you have a good staff, And are you able to acquire talent? That's it. And the reason this hasn't been hammered home yet, the reason it's not a done deal is either because he's asking for things above and beyond what they're willing to come to terms with, which may be the case, or you're dealing with a situation where maybe they're not sure he's going to be around that long. Maybe he's using that as a stepping stone or maybe like a little rest stop to try and wait for an NFL job that he finds desirable to come open that would offer him. And I think a lot of that's in play. So I don't look at it as, whoa, if they get Belichick, watch out. To me, it's if they get Belichick, watch. Like, period. Just watch. Let's see what happens. I'm not enamored with it at all.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you there. Josh Pate is our guest, the commissioner of the sport. His show live every Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, 5 o'clock our time on YouTube. Go check it out. Josh Pate's college football show, at Josh Pate CFB on Twitter. I did want to ask you something on Conference Championship weekend. It kind of connects to that point that we were just talking about how this might look in the future. Like, you know, we love the sport. I think that's the beautiful thing about it. We can come at it from different sides, and we've debated the playoff expansion with you for years. And I'm as pro-expansionist as they come, but I had a take on Monday that my co-host looked at me like I was an alien when I brought it up. It was the first time that for me, not that I didn't love the games, and Georgia, Texas was awesome, and my alma mater went 13-0 and won a Big Ten championship and beat Penn State, but there was a little bit of it for me. I'm not going to lie that I'm going to concede the point. Like, I don't know what the phrase would be, a little bit of the edge of your seatness was gone from the games, knowing that the outcome was essentially predetermined, and in the back of my mind wondering, if my team wins this, are they going to get the worst draw in the college football playoff?
And they debatably did.
Is it better that if they lose this game? It was a very weird thing. So taking off the Josh Pate college football show hat and putting on the, like, we know you love this stuff and you live and you breathe it, and that's why you do it, and that's why we love your show. The college football fan hat. Was your viewership affected at all conference championship weekend as maybe it used to be in years past?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
Look, I am certainly not an I told you so guy. You guys know how humble I am and how deferent I am to self-praise. This is not me at all. But the problem with my stance always was, if we get to the point where I'm proven right, it doesn't matter because things are already messed up anyway. So, like, there's no pleasure in having been right about that. Now, here's what I've also said. This is the first version of this. So I will not put it past the powers that be to make changes that recrystallize the urgency and magnitude on regular season games and conference title games. It could happen. But I think everyone would be kidding themselves if they didn't admit what you just admitted. I was not in Atlanta. I was in Dallas, but I had obviously a bunch of buddies at the SEC championship game. And one of them, who's been around for a long time, he texts me and he says, I got to be honest, this has like an exhibition game vibe to it. I can't really explain it, but I've covered this game for a long time. It's two big brands. This place is packed. So, like, everything should feel as authentic as it always has, but it just doesn't feel that way. And the reason it didn't feel that way is because last year's game featured Georgia and Alabama, and there was a perfect record with Georgia, knowing that if they lost, they were out of the thing. Yeah. That is urgency. That is college football with no safety net under it. When you put the safety net under it, you can still have really good teams. You can still have a really good game, but the level of play is never what has sold college football as being authentically great. If you wanted highest level of play, you just watch the NFL every Sunday. The urgency, the tightrope walk 100 feet above the ground, that's what college football big games have been. And so the trade-off was, we're going to give some of that up to have a bigger playoff, and some people liked it and some people didn't. But even the people who did like it, I'm talking to one right now. You just said, hey, I liked it, but I got to admit now it has impacted this. I guess how you decide whether you're happy or not is, do you care about the college football playoff enough to where that trade-off is worth it? I've just never cared about the playoff. I've never cared about the postseason enough. I value the regular season, and I'm kind of come what may on the postseason. That makes no sense to an average pro sports fan because pro sports are built around the postseason, and I understand that, and I'll grant you that. That's why when I watch Braves baseball, I'm thinking about the postseason. If I were to watch the Falcons, I'm thinking about the postseason, as funny as that sounds. But with college football, like if I were watching the University of Georgia, man, I'm thinking about whether they're going to beat Tennessee, how they stack up against Florida this year. Are they going to play Bama? That's kind of the different lens I've always viewed college football through.
Yeah, and not to kind of just like play devil's advocate to play devil's advocate, and this is why I was surprised. If his team would have lost to Penn State, I don't think he's coming in Monday shrugging his shoulders saying, I don't care. You don't want to be the big team that James Franklin beats. You don't want to be on the other side of that argument. You don't want to have your perfect season ruined in a conference championship. And I think it may take a season, 2, maybe 3, Josh, for us to figure this out. But I think you heard Kirby talk about it. I think Dan would probably agree. Wouldn't you rather have a bye? So, like, I hear what you're saying, but if Georgia loses to Tennessee, it doesn't ruin their season, but, man, it ruins their week. You think Legends calling into Feinbaum less because Alabama may lose a game to Georgia or Vanderbilt or whoever and say, well, we're only have one loss, we're still in the playoff? I still think these people care. I think everybody does care. If the Ducks would have lost their final regular season game of the year, they still would have been in the Big Ten title game, and they largely probably are still in the playoff. But, man, ask Duck fan how they would have felt if they would have lost their 4th straight game to Husky fan. That's kind of where I just differ with you guys on this is, yes, the big broad picture's still there, but a lot of the emotions of that stuff, it still lingers. Miami had a great year by all accounts. They were 10-2. They had a year that they built that up. Their talent pool's getting better. It's a disappointment for people, but they had a 10-2 season. So, like, there are elements, I think, where both sides of this stuff are right.
I think you're right about Miami, but then also wrong about Miami.
Exactly.
You're right that they had a better season. Yes, they did. In fact, Mario's gone from 5-7 to 7-5 to now 10-2 this year.
Yeah.
Okay, so by any discernible metric, they have improved their program year over year. That would be in the previous life. Do you know what people are actually saying about Miami right now, including their own fan base? They're calling themselves abject failures.
Yes.
And they're calling themselves that because the entire tenor of the sport has changed to where if you're not in the postseason, it is zero sum. You're either a success or a failure. And I remember when I was a kid, which is not that long ago, I remember thinking to myself, if like a Tennessee comes into the season with 6-6 expectations, you're kind of thinking in terms of tiers. Like, man, I wonder if we could get to 8 wins. That'd be great. If we get to 9 wins, that'd be exceptional. And there were these tiers that were based relative to expectation. Now it's you either made the playoff or you didn't. That's all the oxygen in the room. Everything about meaning in the sport has to have a playoff sticker affiliation tag on it. And I've never really loved that.
Yeah, Josh Pate, he's the commissioner of the sport. Catch his show every Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, 5 o'clock live on YouTube. Give him a follow on Twitter at Josh Pate CFB. He's our favorite. We could do this for hours. Thanks as always, my man. Look forward to the next one.
All right, brother. Appreciate it.
There you go. Josh Pate, the commissioner of the sport. Let's react a little bit. We'll start the final hour there. The Daily Ticker, as always, brought to you by our great friends at Pelican Brewing Company. Celebrating the season with Bad Santa Cascadian Dark Ale. Bad Santa's coming to town, baby.